The White House was briefly evacuated on Sunday evening after cocaine was found on the property. Discovery of a white powder in a work area of the West Wing led Secret Service to evacuate the premises. Later, in a preliminary field test, that powder did in fact test positive for cocaine.
A spokesperson for the Secret Service confirmed that the drug was found by a uniformed member. He also said that the substance was sent for further testing. President Biden was not at the White House when the incident occurred.
Do you want to say the obvious, or should I?
So obviously the speculation immediately for many people of various political backgrounds is whether or not it was linked to Hunter Biden, who is known to have an addiction, substance abuse issue, specifically including cocaine.
He likes cocaine. I wonder if they found a laptop that was left behind.
Okay, I mean, look. So, I'm very sensitive to the reality that whatever your kids do is not necessarily your fault, and that it can be embarrassing for you. But at the end of the day, your professional life and obligations and duties are separate and apart from what your children are doing.
Sure. Honestly,
fine. But I mean, this is getting into a different kind of a territory. Now we're talking about, and we don't, to be clear, we don't know that this is Hunter Biden.
No, it could have just been a worker.
It could have been a staffer. It could have been anybody.
And it's not anthrax. It's like, I don't think drugs should be illegal anyway. I don't
Amen.
care.
Amen, brother. So, grain of salt, grain of salt. But it is interesting that obviously that's going to come to people's imaginations. Yeah. And the pushback against that is how dare you? And it's well, I think that what's happening right now is that there's been such a suppression of any discussion of what's been going on that's been pretty scandalous with Hunter Biden and the Biden family. There's been such a we're not going to touch this atmosphere in the liberal media, generally speaking, that there's cracks that are beginning to form where people are tired of ignoring the obvious. And this is not obvious. It's not obvious that Hunter Biden did this, but after years of being told, well, the laptop probably isn't real, and you should ignore all of the scandalous reports that are coming out about the family, and there's nothing to see here about $1 million salaries to work at oil gas companies where you have no experience. Eventually, even good liberals are going to start to be like, oh, okay, well, fine. They found cocaine in the White House. Let's start pointing fingers, even if there isn't any evidence to support that, right?
For sure. Yeah, you were bringing up, before we started rolling, a story in the New York Times about Hunter Biden's other child and how this poor little 4-year-old girl is just being totally ignored by the family in a really kind of hurtful way, frankly.
Right. So the New York Times reported at the end of last week the story called Hunter Biden's Daughter and a Tale of Two Families, which talks about this woman, London Roberts, who had a child with Hunter Biden, obviously 4 years ago. Apparently, they met at a time when he was struggling with addiction. She has an interesting background. She's the daughter, this is according to the Times, of a rural gun maker who has kind of a high-profile family herself. Apparently, her family members have gone hunting with Trump. She was working with Hunter Biden at a certain point as an assistant. I mean, an interesting narrative of how these two came together and produced a child, and what people are
bonding over their love of guns.
Okay.
Yeah.
As it's against type, right? Yes. From what you necessarily would describe. Sorry, the hunting buddies have included Donald Trump Jr., not Donald Trump Sr., who taught her at a young age how to hunt turkeys and alligators. I mean, it's wild. It's a wild kind of a story, and the way it comes to have some reflection on the Bidens and not just Hunter himself is the question of whether the family, whether Jill Biden and Joe Biden, have accepted this granddaughter who's blameless in all of this, obviously,
and they haven't,
into their lives.
They have not at all.
They haven't. There was a report that Jill Biden had written a children's book that she dedicated to each of her grandchildren by name individually, but did not include this girl's name. Those are ultimately choices, and we can't see within what's going on within the family. We don't know what the relationship is with the mother, but it is hard to imagine a scenario where you would think that the little girl should be blamed or excluded on the basis of anything at all. It's difficult situations, it's messy family stuff, but I do think that the interest in this now, the New York Times of all people finally writing a long profile on this woman and her daughter, it's because the balloon has burst. Like, there was only so much you could contain for so long, looking the other way. And it started with, frankly, Tara Reade. From the second it became clear that Joe Biden was going to be the nominee, even the biggest, most salacious, most of public interest stories that related to the Bidens were quashed by the media. And all of the people, including Kamala Harris, who once said they believed the 8 accusers earlier in the presidential run, and then the presidential primary in 2020, were suddenly silent and circling the wagon.
Right, more than
Joe
silent,
Biden.
they were disdainful. They were actively engaged in the suppression of discussing any of those things.
I'll never forget Alyssa Milano, who was the face of the Me Too movement.
Nor will, what's her face? Her former...
Rose McGowan.
Yes.
Yeah, well, Rose
She
McGowan,
will also not forget. she had those tweets about vengeance against Alyssa Milano that were so
Well, and
compelling.
I understand why when you think
No, I totally agree with her.
Alyssa Milano, who's the face of the Me Too movement, when Biden was accused by Tara Reade, immediately started a podcast on which she had Joe Biden on the first episode talking about Me Too and what he's going to do for women's issues in the context of the Tara Reade allegations first emerging. So again, nobody knows what happened, but this was a time when the media should have been vetting a claim. And instead, Alyssa Milano, who made her whole political bones on this particular issue, used her platform to insulate Joe Biden against any further critique. And so that has been the pattern up until date, not just with like Me Too stuff, but generally speaking in terms of anything salacious around the Biden family. And I do think ultimately it hurts you not to just engage with some of the less substantive criticism and get them out of the way than to let it fester in the way that it has.
Absolutely. Now, we should again say that we don't know where the cocaine came from. Might have had nothing to do with Hunter Biden. Might have just been someone who works there. It kind of speaks to security issues a little bit. I was on News Nation yesterday, the Hill show, the 5 p.m. Show, talking about this issue, and there was a lot of questions for the reporter we had about, well, how could this happen? There's such heightened security, and I was saying, airport-style security misses stuff all the time. There's drugs in prisons. There's weapons in prisons. They can't. It can be as secure as you possibly imagine, and stuff gets through routinely. Stuff gets through. So I don't actually think it's that surprising. And again, it wasn't a dirty bomb. It was drugs. So
it was drugs.
Everybody can chill out a little bit.
Now I feel like I have to say this as well. It is difficult to imagine a world where this happened in the Obama White House without this being the top story in the country for a year.
Well, I mean, what would you expect after Mr. Tan Suit?
That's the thing. It is.
Tan suits are a pathway a gateway drug to hardcore drugs.
Apparently not. Apparently the tan suit is a sign of clean living because the Obamas have managed to continue to, for all of the ways that I am deeply critical of his policy choices and the way that he continues to run cover for a corrupt, corporatized Democratic Party, they have been squeaky clean on the personal life front. And it really does, the contrast with the Bidens, it really does, I think, highlight how you got to give it to the Obamas rather, for keeping their nose clean all this time.
They were not dealing with a Hunter Biden type individual.
No.
That's for sure. All right, we'll have more Rising right after this.